Hi, the research we obtained is entitled Pricing Cost Analysis as Basis for City Ordinance of Skipjack Tuna Fish at Public Market, Surigao City. And this research is made by Ms. Angeli L. Arano and Charmis S. Morales. So what is this research all about? This research is about the price cost analysis, where the researcher is intended to study how the vendor of skipjack tuna fish in Surigao City set their prices on the product. Hence, to do this, the researcher gathered necessary data, which includes the direct materials, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead of selected vendor of skipjack tuna fish, and then the researcher analyzes the data to determine which vendor overpriced or which vendor has a low price on tuna fish. Moreover, the purpose of the study is to conduct a price-cost analysis so that the city ordinance will be informed and can decide about the proper amount to allocate on the said product. So in the absence of this, which the many vendors will eventually set price based on what they want, which is a greater factor that can greatly affect the customer or other business establishments who buy skipjack tuna fish. So to address this problem, this research may contribute solution. In this video, I am going to present various tables about the profile of the business owners in terms of their number of years, their capital investment, and the source of fish, which is the skipjack tuna fish. A table will be shown on your screen about the number of years and the capitalization of the participants. The researcher will selected 10 participants with optional names, so the researcher only used the alphabetical order from A to G. From the table shown in your screen, it implies that 30% of them have been 12 years in the business, 20% had been 10 years and 15 years in business, and 10% who were in business for 5, 18, and 20 years. So majority of the participants had been 12 years in the business, while the other participants were in between 5 and 10 years. And as to capitalization, 50% of the total number of participants allocated the amount of 10,000 in putting up the business, while those who are allocated 7,000, 11,000, 15,000, and 20,000 were 10% of the total number of participants. So meaning the majority of the participants allocated the 10,000 for a capital in putting the said business.
Hi, welcome to this section. Cost analysis in each production cycle of participants. The table will be shown in the screen. Table 2 shows the result of the total cost of participants A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and J in each production cycles as to direct materials, direct labor, overhead, and markup. It will be the basis for their cost as to buy the skipjack tuna fish and the overall total cost. Table 2, participant A had a total cost of 17,600, participant B had a total cost of 5,680, participant C had a total cost of 8,390, participant D had a total cost of 6,013.75 pesos. Participant E had a total cost of 5,965 pesos. Participant F had a total cost of 9,340 pesos. Participant G had a total cost of 10,370 pesos. Participant H had a total cost of 10,310. Participant I had a total cost of 6,180, and participant J had a total cost of 6,980. According to the stall owners, the cost they had depend upon the number of boxes they bought from the fish landing. Some of them were renting their spaces at the market, while others owned their spaces. What stall owners stated they paid their boxes every quarterly, which an additional to their expenses. In addition, according to the said stall owner, that skipjack tuna fish varies its prices as it depends on the sizes. However, the skipjack tuna fish is considered to be the most in demand by the customers at the public market in all seasons. Some of the participants relied only on per kilo when they sold it to the public market, so to get enough profit which will sustain them in paying for electric bill. But some of the participants didn't follow the right price as mandated for the city ordinance, of which, according to them, if they would not follow, they would have difficulty getting better profit enough to pay for their expenses. But the participants made mention that their basis of deciding what price to make depends on the number of boxes they sold from fish landing. Next is price of skipjack tuna fish. Based on the data shown in Table 3, price of skipjack tuna fish in City Ordinance, market price, full moon and not full moon, fisherman price, full moon and not full moon. Table 3 presents the skipjack tuna fish based on City Ordinance, market price and fisherman's price in full moon or not in full moon. In terms of city ordinance, the price is 120 pesos per kilo, either full moon or not full moon. As to market price, the price will be 120 pesos per kilo, just at the price when it is in full moon. The stall owner added that when it is not full moon, the price falls at 300 pesos per kilo. As to the fisherman's price, when it is not full moon, the price is 80 pesos per kilo, while if not in full moon, the price would be 120 pesos per kilo, meaning if the prices are being compared as to full moon and not full moon, the highest price will be during the time when it is not in full moon, because according to the fisherman, during this time, the catch is not so abundant and net supply would not enough. Unlike when in full moon, there could be a big chance to get an abundant fish catch, of which the supply also be enough to sell at public market. The stall owner said that when there is more fish to catch, then there could be more to be sold. According to the stall owners, the price of the fish would depend on the day, if it is full moon or not, and the most expensive price for the catch is when it is not full moon, because during this time the skipjack tuna fish is hard to be caught by the fishermen.
Hi, for the continuation of our reporting, we're now going to present to you all about the significant differences of the direct materials cost, direct labor cost, and the overhead cost when grouped according to business profile in terms of the number of years in the business and the capitalization. And we were going to determine that through the statistical tool, which is the Analysis of Variance, or the ANOVA, which is the tool used to assess the potential differences in a scale level dependent variable by a nominal level variable. So before we proceed to the significant differences of those direct material costs, direct labor, and the overhead cost, we're going to recall the hypothesis of the study. So it was stated that at 0.05 level significance, it was hypothesized that there is no significant difference in the cost when they are grouped according to the business profile. Now let's begin to the table 4, the significant difference of direct materials cost when grouped according to business profile in terms to the number of years in the business and to the capital. So as we can see to the table, it already summarized, but we're going to discuss it individually. So we're going to start with the significant difference of direct materials cost when grouped according to the business profile in terms to the number of years in the business. As we can see in the table, it shows that the number of years in the business got the p-value of 0.478, and the decision was to accept the null hypothesis. But based on the validation using the one-way ANOVA from the Minitab, the direct material versus the number of years, it resulted that the p-value was 0.041. And therefore, we conclude that we should reject the null hypothesis that there is no significant difference in the direct material cost of the vendors of skipjack tuna fish in Surigao public market when grouped according to the number of years in the business. Meaning to say, as the business is operating which varies to the number of years, there is still a significant difference to the direct material cost. For instance, the inflation rate. As the prices are fluctuating through the years, the direct material cost of the skipjack tuna fish is also affected. So in comparison to the actual result from the thesis or to the research study, the decision is not the same. The decision coming from the researchers was to accept the null hypothesis. On the other hand, based on the result of the ANOVA from the Minitab, the result is to reject the null hypothesis. And now we are in the significant difference of direct materials cost when grouped according to business profile in terms to the capital. So based on the actual result from the research study or from the thesis, the p-value of the capital was 0.131 and the decision was to accept the null hypothesis. Based on the validation using the one-way ANOVA from the Minitab, direct material versus the capitalization, the p-value resulted to 0.083. So it revealed that the capitalization got a p-value of 0.083 is more than the alpha of 0.05. So in this case, we accept the null hypothesis that there is no significant difference in the direct material cost of the vendors of skipjack tuna fish in Surigao public market when grouped according to the capital invested by the vendors. From this result, we can read between the lines that it is not necessarily mean if the direct material cost is lower, then the vendor has really invested a capital that is a really big amount. Even the direct material cost is higher and the vendor has really the interest to engage in that business, he or she can still invest a large amount of money. So it is not a direct proportional half. Henceforth, there is no significant difference to the direct material cost when grouped according to the capitalization. In comparison to the actual result from the thesis, we got the same decision to accept the null hypothesis.
And now, let's focus in the table number 5. Significant differences of direct labor cost when grouped according to the business profile. So there are 2 pointers here, the number of years in the business and the capitalization. But in terms of number of years in the business, the p-value is 0.007. So then, the researcher's decision is to not accept hypothesis or to reject it. But for the validation rather, using one-way ANOVA, direct labor versus number of years, it resulted that the p-value is 0.007. So the p-value of 0.007, which is lower than the alpha of 0.05, it expressed that the decision is to reject the null hypothesis that there is no significant differences in the direct labor cost of the vendor's employees of skipjack tuna fish in Surigao public market when grouped according to the number of years of the business. We can interpret then that as the business is operating for how many years already, the direct labor cost to the employees is also getting higher. Therefore, there is a significant difference of the direct labor cost when grouped according to the number of years. Concurring to the actual result from the thesis, we got the same decision to reject or do not accept the null hypothesis. And now, in terms of capitalization, the p-value is 0.003. Thus, the researcher's decision is to reject it or do not accept the hypothesis. For validation, through the use of Minitab, one-way ANOVA, direct labor versus capitalization, it is expressed that the p-value of 0.003, which is lower than the alpha of 0.05, the decision is to not accept or reject the null hypothesis that there is no significant difference in the direct labor cost of the vendor's employees of skipjack tuna fish in Surigao public market when grouped according to capitalization. It means that if the business owner invested a big amount of money to the business and its business is getting bigger, then more employees are needed so as the labor cost is getting higher. Therefore, the null hypothesis should be rejected. Concurring to the actual result from the thesis, we got the same decision to reject or do not accept the null hypothesis.
From the last table 6, the significant difference of overhead cost when grouped according to business profile in terms to the number of years in the capitalization. But now we're going to start with the significant difference of overhead cost being grouped according to business profile in terms to the number of years in the business. So as we can see to the table, which is the actual result from the thesis project or research study, the p-value has a 0.290 and the decision was to accept the null hypothesis. But based on the validation using the one-way ANOVA from the Minitab overhead versus the number of years, it resulted that the p-value was 0.085. So based from this result, it showed that the number of years got a p-value of 0.085 is more than the alpha of 0.05. In this case, we accept the null hypothesis that there is no significant difference in the overhead cost when grouped according to the number of years in the business. This explicates that even though the business is operating for 5 years or more, or even less than 5 years, there is still no significant difference in the cost incurred regarding the overhead. Therefore, there is no significant difference to this overhead cost when grouped according to the number of years. In comparison to the result from the thesis, we get the same decision to accept the null hypothesis. And now we're in the significant difference of overhead cost when grouped according to the business profile in terms to the capital. So as we can see to the actual result from the thesis, the p-value was 0.157 and the decision was to accept the null hypothesis. But based on the validation, using the one-way ANOVA from the Minitab, overhead versus the capitalization, the p-value was 0.238. So in terms of the significant difference of overhead cost when grouped according to capitalization, from the result of ANOVA through the use of Minitab, it revealed that the capitalization got a p-value of 0.238 is more than the alpha of 0.05. From this result, we can interpret that the money or capital that invested to the business does not matter to the costs incurred in the overhead. Henceforth, there is no significant difference in the overhead cost when grouped according to capitalization. Concurring to the actual result from the thesis, we got the same decision to accept the null hypothesis.
For the conclusion, most of the p-values from the actual thesis project and the results from the Minitab were not the same. However, the decision whether to accept or reject the null hypothesis are the same, such as the significant differences of direct material when grouped according to capitalization. The result from the thesis project was 0.131, meanwhile the result from the Minitab was 0.083. Moreover, they still have the same conclusion to accept the null hypothesis, as well as the significant differences of the overhead cost when grouped according to the number of years and capitalization. The results from the thesis project were 0.290 and 0.157 respectively. On the other hand, the results from the Minitab were 0.085 and 0.238 respectively. Nonetheless, they still have the same conclusion to accept the null hypothesis. Also, during the validation, there's only one conclusion from the result of the thesis project and from the Minitab that was not the same. It is the significant difference of the direct material cost when grouped according to the number of years. The result from the thesis project was 0.478 and the decision was to accept the null hypothesis. Meanwhile, the result from the Minitab was only 0.041. From the result, the decision was to reject the null hypothesis. Another thing, there are two p-values from results in the actual thesis project which were all the same to the results from the Minitab, such that the significant differences of direct labor costs when grouped according to the number of years of the business and the capitalization. The results from the thesis project were 0.007 and 0.003 respectively, so as the results from the Minitab. Nonetheless, they have the same p-values and they have the same conclusion to reject the null hypothesis. That would be all. Thank you.